Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth of the ModelShare workshops, a series aimed at developing good practices and recommendations for improving metadata in computational model sharing and publishing platforms. Through the series, we'll be informing a preprint to be published later in June, maybe in July, by joining our Google group, and you can find that link in the Zoom chat. You can make sure to receive updates about upcoming workshops and how to contribute to the preprint. So please join the Google group. Series began back in February, and we've already heard from colleagues from, among others, PLOS, CERN, the University of Potsdam Network for Computational Modeling in the Social and Ecological Sciences, and of course, the Open Modeling Foundation, who is running this series. These are all organizations that make a huge impact on the world of open science, and today's first speaker will also be from, today's two speakers will be from similar organizations. Matt Byes is the executive director of DataCite, where he guides a dedicated team in facilitating the creation, discovery, citation, connection, and global utilization of research resources. We'll then hear from Melissa Harrison, the group team leader of literature science services at EMBL-EBI. Melissa is a science graduate with over 20 years experience in science, technical, and medical publishing, a commitment to open science, and a vision for harnessing technology to improve the research process. Without further ado, because I don't want to save too much time, I'd like to hand over to Matt. I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Great, thanks very much for the introduction. And let me just check that you can see my screen. And I need to find my slides. There we go.
Brilliant.
Perfect. Great, yeah. Very good to be sharing with you a bit of perspective from my point of view, and the work that we're doing at DataCite around open models, and also providing some insight into kind of general context around open science and some of the efforts that are going on across the ecosystem. So to start with a bit of context, and I always like to start with who we are and how we approach things as DataCite, and that is really a community. It's a global community, and it's really important that when we look at these different topics across different domains, across different geographies, it's really what brings us together and how we form that community of practice. And that's what DataCite is. It's a community that shares a common interest, and this common interest is ensuring that research outputs and resources are openly available and connected so that their reuse can advance knowledge across and between disciplines. And so very kind of blue skies, but that's really what we talk about as a community. And part of what I'm talking about today is that we recognize that there is a very good, succinct description of research in the research article, but it's not the entirety of the research study or research lifecycle. And so we work to connect all research outputs and resources, and this ranges right from samples and images through to data and preprints. And by working together, we work to create persistent identifiers and the metadata around these persistent identifiers, integrate this into different workflows, and then facilitate the discovery and reuse of these research outputs and resources. So just putting this as a bit of context as we work through the different aspects around open models and some of the work that we've been doing. I like to start with this, and this is something that's very light-hearted, but I just thought of something I'd like to know more about, and the response being, oh, that's a damn shame, and thinking about a world where we didn't have access to information, access to all these research outputs and resources at our fingertips. And we live in a world today where we rarely have a lot of information available, but work needs to be done to make that easy We need to create incentives to encourage people to make it available. And so this is a big context shift and an evolution that we're going through as a community globally, and the work that we're doing. But also underpinning this work, as we work to make information available and make it readily reusable, we need to make sure that it's sustainable. And so when we invest in building information ecosystems, we need to make sure that it's here for the long term, that if we're going to invest resources and money, we won't see this disappear in 10 to 15 years. And so that's why it's important that we do this as a collective. It's a global community effort and not building independent silos. The connections are really important. We talk about connections between different research outputs and resources, but it's also about the connections between different systems and services that create that interoperability. We're not in a revolution. Open science has, been around, or practices have begun since the 17th century with the advent of the academic journal, and we are really here to continue on that journey and work together in making information available. Open models is really exciting because this is something that really brings power to the community to understand the models that are involved in the research lifecycle. But the fundamentals of sharing research outputs and resources is still true today. We obviously also want to make sure that we're looking at things with an open mind, because we can sit in a group here today and have very clear perspectives, but if we go from one region to the next, there's different contexts and different aspects that need to be considered. And so as we work together, we can't just look at things from a single perspective. It's really important that we are democratic in the way that we think about access to knowledge, and that we're making sure that tools and services are available on a global scale, and that we're pragmatic in our approach. Some open science fundamentals, just to touch on, and then I'm really going to get into kind of the core of what we are focusing on today around open models. But really just looking at the opportunity that we have in open science, and the landscape, by fostering this innovation and supporting knowledge transfer, we have the ability to accelerate reuse, which is really, really important. We talk about making research accessible, but it's really the reuse that really brings rigor to the scholarly record. And so by accelerating that reuse, we can innovate quicker and collaborate more effectively. By reproducing, we build trust in the research that is being produced. It provides transparency and open data to facilitate the validation of the research findings. And we have this enhanced innovation that this broad dissemination brings in sparking collaboration between different colleagues around the globe. So jumping into open models, if my clicker will work. As I mentioned, and this was a lot of what we focus on at DataCite as a global community, but it's really the entirety of the research lifecycle, and you'll see very different or different visualizations or steps, and so I don't want to get too caught up on these are the exact steps of a research lifecycle, but really just noting that a research study or research is conducted in a life cycle, and it's not just a once-off publication. And I think we all know that, and that's why we're all here and then specifically talking about open models, because we recognize that's important, and an important integral part of the scholarly record. And so we need to have this global shift to elevate these elements to make sure that we can incentivize it. And so this is something that we're really working on quite actively at the moment. There has been progress being made, and this is really exciting to see. There are over 17,000 registered open models that are accessible through DataCite. And this comes from a variety of resources, various repositories that are doing this, databases archived, as well as platforms like Hugging Face that are registering DOI metadata, making that available to the community. There are very limited connections to models, and so this is an area that we definitely want to see and work that needs to happen to uncover these connections. So when I talk about connections, what I'm referring to is when an article or a data set or anything references or links to a model. And so this is really important, because if we have a model, we also want to understand what that is related to, the context of that model. This is something that we need to work on. It's not to say that it's not there. It's not there in academic papers per se. It's really that we need to employ technology to go uncover those citations. And so we're doing this in various contexts and various other efforts in pulling out those mentions or citations from different papers, from different sources, as well as allowing third parties to make claims about links between different things so we can benefit as a community. So this is the work that we're doing going forwards, looking at preprints, looking at journal articles, and bringing this into the metadata and enabling these links. And this gives us the ability to start linking these different things together. I like to pin this to people, places, things. And so more generally, and this can be applied across different resources and outputs. But really, we're looking at connecting these together, because this helps us address the downstream use cases that we have to analyze and assess. And I know in the series that there's an assessment discussion, and hopefully Chris will also kind of touch on these different use cases and elements. So with people, we look at ORCID IDs, we map to other identifiers where possible. Places, we utilize raw IDs, and we also map to other organizational identifiers. So this is part of that crosswalks and sustainability of infrastructure that I was referring to. And then things more broadly, just outputs and resources, enabling the ability to also group things like, so a repository or a particular data management plan or a grant, you could also consider a thing, but it can also group the other related outputs and resources to that. At DataCite in the PID graph, what we do is we bring together connection metadata from different trusted sources. And so this is across the related identifiers. So this is relations between outputs and resources, the name identifier, which is for people, and then affiliation and funder for obviously the affiliation and funding information that we have available. We bring this together, and this gives us the ability to unlock insights, and specifically around open models, we can start looking at things like, okay, give me a visualization of this model and the different relations to this, and how do I track these? And this is openly available in tools like DataCite Commons. We also have the ability to understand impacts from across various domains. And so this helps us make facilitated decisions around where there's impact, where the models are influencing research in particular areas and helping advance that research and enhances that collaboration. A couple of things to note around a pathway to increasing adoption. And so this is really important. If we look as a community, how do we move this forwards? Well, one, we have some challenges around suitable incentives. So the current incentives don't really prioritize open sharing of models. And so there's very few funders, very few research institutions that will consider it in tenure and promotion, that this is an important element of the scholarly record. And so we don't have incentives. The technology is not necessarily simple. And when I talk about technology, I'm specifically talking about the technology related to organizations and communities such as DataCite, when we talk about open scholarly infrastructure. And so this is also hindering adoption. And then fragmentation, we always have the challenge of, and then we all know that anecdote of, oh, the standard doesn't quite address my needs, so I'll create one more standard. And so this leads to fragmentation. So the solution in my mind is really around collective effort. So we need to bring together both tangible incentives and easy technology. So this offers clear benefits for open sharing of models and develop user-friendly platforms for accessing and using models. Hugging Face and folks like that have also done a lot of work in improving this, and there's various repositories and databases that have done a lot of work. And then it's the community collaboration. As we on this change journey, we need to work together and constantly talk to each other and evolve together. There is hope, and so I do think, you know, when I reflect on some of the things that I've said, it can sound like, oh, well, there's so many of these different challenges and there's a little bit of adoption or growth of adoption happening, but it's not really being cited or tracked effectively, or where do we even begin? And so I want to try kind of distill that briefly. And so the first piece is that we just need to focus on getting policymakers and funders on board. And so that's really a clear effort that we as a community can focus on, advocate for those tangible incentives for open model sharing and influence those policies to prioritize this. We can work collectively to simplify workflows. So talking to the research community, making sure that the researchers that are producing models and making them available, making sure that the tools that they use and these existing workflows are plugged into open scholarly infrastructure to make sure that we can track that very easily. So not asking them to do a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of work, but really plugging it into the existing workflows. Also recognizing that perfection may not be attainable, and so progress is really important here. And that's a key point, because even though we're not seeing the perfect solution just yet, we are making progress, and that is good. And we often get caught in that conundrum in this community, in that we sit around and we wait and we debate for the perfect solution, but we don't make any progress. And so it's really, really important that we focus on progress over perfection as a start. Obviously, I'm not saying that we shouldn't strive for perfection. That's really important. But it's progress that is key here to move this forwards. We need to encourage collaboration, so foster partnerships among diverse groups, develop these interoperable workflows, and enhance this accessibility and reusability. And this brings together this culture change that I've been alluding to, in that at the top, if we work to create these tangible incentives that is really rewarding, and at the bottom, from a technology point of view and service point of view, we make this really simple and easy, that's when it becomes normal and normative that we have open models as part of the scholarly record that are recognized, that researchers are incentivized and eager to share and make available. And so that's what we're working for, and that's something that I'd encourage you to think about in the breakout or the discussion elements, is that how can we focus on making sure that these different tools are easy, but also that the funders and policymakers are making it rewarding to affect this change, and what can we each individually do to move that forwards. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was a fascinating overview of all of many elements that are involved. And I like the way you talk about people, places, and things. I am going to pause the recording. And with that, I think it is time to listen to Melissa's presentation.
That is correct. I'm just changing it to slideshow. Okay.
Perfect.
Have I got the right screen? Okay, brilliant. So thank you for the invite to talk here today. I'm going to take a slightly different approach to Matt. So I'm representing EMBL-EBI and our approach to fair model sharing. I know that when we were discussing this for this kind of this webinar and what we were going to talk about, I know I was very keen to define what a model was, and so I'll do that from our point of view along the slides. But just to introduce myself and EMBL-EBI. So EMBL-EBI is EMBL's European Bioinformatics Institute, and so it's the home of big data in biology, and we exist to make the biomolecular data generated by scientists available to anyone with an internet connection, free of charge. So, and we're one of 6 sites of EMBL, which is the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, which is an intergovernment organization. So bioinformatics is the study of biology with computers, so bioinformatics. And at EMBL-EBI, we focus on this and big data, and we manage over 40 open data resources that are used regularly by millions of scientists around the world. And bioinformatics makes it possible to collect, store, and add value to data so that researchers in many fields can find and analyze them efficiently. So open data can be freely used and reused and redistributed by anyone. And when it's open, others can use it to ask new questions and get insights. And it drives new discoveries. And like I said before, all of our resources are open. And the next slide, I'm going to talk about fair, but basically when data is fair, anyone can use it to gain new insights and make discoveries. So sorry, it's quite a few kind of introductory slides here, but so fair data, I'm assuming most people are really familiar with this, but it's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So I've cut up that image and kind of put it on slides as I go through, because even though I've been working in this field for years, I still quite often forget what the F stands for, or the A, or the I, or the R. So in the next I'll be demonstrating how we approach FAIR with 2 specific resources. So this is quite a boring and dense slide, but this is what I was talking about earlier about the definitions of models in my world, which is life sciences. So we have systems biology models. So these involve the mathematical representation of biological processes to study complex system behavior. And using an example of that, you could think about modeling disease progression. So COVID-19, the pandemic provided brilliant examples of this sort of thing, but it could be used to show how policy decisions were influenced during whether we went into lockdown, and that was modeling disease progression was used for that. And then we also have machine learning. That is a kind of newer field, but in our for models for us that's included. So these that's the use and development of computer systems that are able to learn and adapt without following explicit instructions, and by using algorithms and statistical models to analyze and draw inferences from patterns in data. So sorry, that was I was reading that out quite dry, but an example of that is that you can use different sources of data to predict treatment responses in a patient. So for instance, if you're gathering genomic, molecular, demographic, and clinical features, you could potentially predict the immunotherapy response for a patient. So these things are pretty important, and these models can be found in one of our 2 resources that I'm going to talk about. So I represent Europe PMC, so it's an open access repository of life sciences journals and preprint articles. And I'm also going to talk about biomodels, which is a repository of these mathematical models, and how we work together, and also how the different resources are approaching the fair data issue. So like I said, Europe PMC is a open full text content index. We work in collaboration with PubMed and PubMed Central. So we have 8 million full text articles and books, and 1 million accepted manuscripts that are delivered from PMC, NCBI Bookshelf, and also from our funders fundees submitting their accepted manuscripts via Europe PMC Plus. And since 2008, we've supplemented this with preprints, and we now cover 33 different preprint servers, have 750,000 preprints, and also we have a full text preprint system whereby we're converting for our funders, and we also did this for COVID-19. So there's about 61K preprints in full text within Europe PMC. And I think the full text aspect of it will become clearer when I explain some of the things that we do with text and data mining. And we also have all of the abstracts from PubMed itself as well. So Europe PMC builds on top of this corpus that we have in collaboration with NCBI, having PubMed and PubMed Central. So we work using text and data mining techniques, and we're in the process of changing a lot of this to machine learning. We annotate bioentities, and we also extract and link data to resources. So this can be done in a number of different ways, but we can either do the text and data mining, looking for the patterns for accession numbers and DOIs, but also we have links with other databases, as you'd expect, being at EMBL-EBI, that also provide links between the data and the literature that we surface. And all of this is provided through open APIs. So as you can see, I've used the F for findable and interoperable for some of those features. A recent thing that we've also started doing is exposing bioentities that are locked in supplemental files. So again, accession numbers or data DOIs, they're quite often within supplemental files, and it's just happenstance or the way that publishing has happened over time that a lot of information can be locked away in a supplemental file that's not really that accessible for a lot of people. So we have a project whereby we're unlocking all of that by pushing it through our text and mining API, and then we'll make those annotations available in the API as well as on the front end. So that's Europe PMC. Then if I go to biomodels, so that's the repository of mathematical models of biological and biomedical systems. So this has a submission system whereby authors of the models can submit to the database, and this ensures that the models are findable and accessible. So it's great. It's one resource where these items are all held together. But then the additional factor of this database is that many of these are then curated. So as you can see, there are 1,073 models currently that have been curated. And this involves reproducing the model, but also metadata enrichment. So tagging using ontologies. And this semantic enrichment can be used by things like Omics Discovery Index and EBI search as examples. And this is where various databases and searches of different databases. So within our world, that would be Pride, Array, and different databases. And this is all imported into the other resources and reused. So it kind of amplifies the effect of sharing the information about the models through other databases. So the curation in this sense is enhancing findability. So the author of the model submits the publication data and basic metadata, but then the curation process actually amplifies that and allows it to be more interoperable as well as reusable through the testing. Another thing that the system does is that the curators, so this is manual curators, so it's not the system doing it, but when they're looking at the models, they encode the code into SBML. So that is Systems Biology Markup Language. So it's a well-known specific format, and it means that the people submitting can do in any format, but then it's encoded in this, which means that it can be imported into other tools like Python, MATLAB, R. So again, supporting reuse and interoperability. And also for machine learning trained models, these are also converted to ONNX. So that's the Open Neural Network Exchange. So in this instance, it can be imported into other frameworks such as PyTorch, TensorFlow, and again allows people to use other frameworks to utilize the predictions. So just thinking about how we work together, biomodels, an author provides a PM ID, so that's a PubMed ID or a DOI on submission to biomodels, and that uses EuropeMC API to fetch the publication metadata, so it prevents authors from having to kind of write it all in again. But this has the added benefit that if the model isn't actually cited in the paper, the biomodels API, they provide the link to EuropeMC. So that means that on a literature database such as EuropeMC, even though the biomodels aren't cited in an article, we do create that link so that people can see that they are relevant to this article. And then going the reciprocal way, if EuropeMC is text and data mining, it's using the dictionary-based accession patterns. So we have the patterns for biomodels. And if we find a citation within the text to a biomodel, we then link that to the biomodel's database. So therefore, in the case where the biomodel database hasn't got the link to the literature, we are creating it through our text and data mining. And as I mentioned earlier, having full text enables us to do this. That it's unlikely that the biomodel would be cited in the abstract, or if it is, we can, but it's when we have full text that we're enabled to make these connections more easily. And this does help increase discoverability and of the website as well as the model. So I think this is a really interesting and insightful slide about the reproducibility crisis. So I think we often hear that term, reproducibility crisis, and it's like really what's going on. But this kind of helps explain like some of the issues. So what the biomodels team did is they were using peer-reviewed research articles from 152 journals that were published from 1980 to 2020. And these models were curated as part of the normal biomodels activity. So it was a kind of biased sample, but it's something that they found. But the thing that's worrying is that only 51% of the models that they had in the system were reproducible. So as you can see from the graph, that with some kind of correction to the data and to the information there, they could correct some of them. And then also with communication with the author, they could correct some more. But this is why quite often manual curation or efforts are actually really important, because it's not the fault it's the fault of the author, but the authors might not necessarily know what they need to do. And quite often, I think we all know you've got to build things for your future self, and you might not really realize what is actually missing to be able to make the data reproducible. And so this really helps with that process, and it means that there's feedback to the authors about it. So, as I said, machine learning models are a newer area, and so the team had published this preprint, which gives guidance on how to make machine learning models fairer, and the ways and means in which to do that, and just helping to guide people around how best to do this, to ensure that before too many are delivered, that they are reproducible and fair. So in summary, I just talking about the two resources and the things that we do to enhance FAIR. So we have the links between Europe PMC and the biomodels databases, and as well as EBI search that are surfacing the links between the literature and the data, and helping it and the models, helping it be more findable. Then accessible, so the models are all open source code under CC0 licenses, and so they are reusable and accessible. And then with regard to interoperability, so the curated data, the curated models are encoded, like I said, in the systems biology markup language, or ONNX, the Open Neural Network Exchange, to allow them to be reproduced and reused. And also the links and the annotations are available in the Europe PMC annotations API. So again, kind of helping propagate their use. And then they're reusable. So as I mentioned, as I kind of showed earlier, the models in the curated section, they are tested and validated against the associated publications, and it's made sure that they are reusable by others in the community. So that's it. I would want to definitely acknowledge Sheriff, who is actually on the call as well. So he's the biomodels expert. So I feel like really he should have been speaking. But if there are any specific questions, thank you for joining, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer them more fluently than me. But that's it from me. Thank you.